We will call to order the Plan Commission meeting in Village of North Hudson, Wednesday, May 3rd. We'll start with the roll call.
Member Bachman,
Here.
Howard,
Here.
Chair Miser,
Here.
Member Mitchell,
Here.
Schneider,
Here.
Wecken,
Here.
and White.
Here.
Good. We have a full house. We have a quorum. First item is the approval of the minutes of our last meeting, which was February 15th.
Oh, that's your.
Entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes of February 15th, 2017.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Is there any discussion, corrections? Hearing none, all in favor of approval of the minutes, signify by saying aye. Aye. Approved. The next item is, we're going to have a public hearing in a little bit. Preliminary plat application to create Artisan North subdivision, a major subdivision containing 8 lots on 4.77 acres located to the south of Pine Street North at the corner of Pine Street North and Lemon Street. Applicant Mark Erickson of Landstead Companies, LLC, discussion, possible recommendation. What we will do on a public hearing like this, we will have the applicant make their presentation. After that, the village engineer will make his comments and notes about that. And then we will open it up to the public for questions and discussion. There's a lot of people here, so when we get to the public part of it, we'll start off by limiting to 3 minutes per person. If not everybody speaks and there's still more questions, we can get into that. Once we close the public hearing, then it will be discussion between the members of the Plan Commission and the principals. So, on that, if a representative of the project would like to speak, please go up to the podium. This is on the cable TV. And if you have some way of displaying your maps that the TV camera can pick them up, that would be good. I don't know if we have an easel, otherwise we'll just put it in front of the podium, I guess. Let's see if that works. And the technician advised us that the microphone is very directional.
Okay.
So if you move the mic or take it out of the stand and take it with you.
Got it?
We'll set that up right away as long as we've got it.
Nice.
And then everybody can see what you're talking about, because there's a lot of stuff there.
Thanks. I'm Mark Erickson of Landstead Companies, LLC, and have been trying to get this property developed for about the past 4 years. And finally, my financing and everything came together. I was able to purchase the property in September, and been through pre-preliminary a couple times with approval, and through the Public Works a couple weeks ago with a recommendation there for approval. So we're pleased to be able to stand before you today and talk more about our project, answer any questions you have. Roger Humphreys is here, he's our engineer, so any technical questions can be directed at him. But in a nutshell, we've got 8 lots that range in size from about 1/3 of an acre to about 0.75 acres. We're trying to maintain as many trees as we can in the neighborhood. We did start the first home in the neighborhood a few weeks ago, and obviously won't be starting any more until the plat is recorded. But that home is going to be in the Fall Parade Home, so we wanted to get a jump on it. It is pre-sold, and we have 3 of the 8 lots spoken for already at this time. The grading that we're doing there is sort of dictated by the elevation of the sanitary sewer in the street, because we have to try and get positive drainage between the homes and the sewer. So that's going to necessitate, the reason we've had to remove the trees we have is pretty much because of that. But we're going to maintain as many trees as we can throughout the rest of the operation. and look forward to having a successful and attractive addition to the village. So, any questions?
Just
Yeah.
continue on with your
Got
presentation.
it, got it. And then, okay,
Yeah.
okay, fine. So, Roger, do you have anything you want to say?
Sure, I can kind of,
Just as a comment here, this is being recorded and it's on cable television, so everyone who has to speak, who is interested in speaking, will have to speak up at the podium, so so it gets on the recording.
Understood.
Yep.
Okay.
my name's Roger Humphrey. I'm the senior project manager leading up a land development group for Stantec Consulting out of Roseville. I have a lot of history in St. Croix County and in projects surrounding this general area, and I've been working with Mark and Gary on the development of the project. We've gone through a lot of design processes. We've submitted plans. I've been working closely with Kevin Oyam from Cedar Corporation, who's the city engineer. Kevin has, I believe, gone through the plans quite extensively to the point where, we've made several revisions and have kind of gone back and forth and made adjustments to what I think is in essence a good plan. I guess one thing I'd like to kind of say as well is, we're trying to be as sensitive to the land areas as possible. And in general, the overall design is we set the street grade a little lower so that we're actually going through an expense to insulate some of the sanitary mains so that we're not hauling in a lot of dirt and kind of pushing the construction limits out any farther than they are. We, I think, when I sat down with Mark, going through kind of our first initial design and where we ended up, our first design, we just kind of how sometimes we have to act in the business is we have to grade things a certain way because those are certain industry standards, and we were pushed all the way out to the property lines, and we were doing some things that I would say initially we didn't quite like, and so I sat down with Mark and we kind of refined and massaged the plan a little bit, and I think Landset Homes are going to go through a process where how they build the homes, and these are custom homes, that helps basically bring in the construction limits a little bit. And I guess I'm just going to flip this plan. The plan on the other side of this board is a existing condition plan that essentially kind of shows where our construction limits are. And with that is that, I kind of want to illustrate that we're keeping as tight as we can to the cul-de-sac road that's proposed so that we can maintain as many trees as possible. And that was a prime directive set by both Gary and Mark at Landset Homes that this is what we needed to do. As we went through the process, again, Kevin and I have made I've made several revisions to his to a series of comments that he's made, and he's issued a kind of a final memorandum, I think, to the village. We've read it, we've looked at it, and we feel we can comply with everything that he has on that list. But I guess I want to just flip this so you can see what that part of the plan is. It's in the plan sets that has been submitted. There's no new information that's being thrown out here at this time, but I think it's relevant. And then with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody would have. I don't know if I can
You
talk
can
and
take the
point to.
microphone out and hold it in your hand.
Oh, there we go. I think that helps. So this is the project area. Down here is the existing cul-de-sac, and the project is proposed to extend up here a small cul-de-sac and having building sites in essence around the outside of that perimeter, and one additional site up in that area. This is the proposed construction limits, and this is kind of the tree canopy that exists out there, and so we're saving a lot of trees in this area, certainly a lot of trees here. The steeper slope area is all being maintained, and then along this edge, we're also saving some trees. Getting back to the plan, you can kind of see the same thing here. The cul-de-sac is coming in. We have building sites that fit around here. We're proposing a stormwater infiltration pond, a series of pipes that yeah, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, you can slant it that way a little bit more because we all have it in front of us, so as long as we can follow with your laser. That should be good. Can you see that, everyone?
Does that work? Okay. Yeah, again, trying to, so this is our stormwater infiltration pond. There's also an existing storm sewer easement that comes down here. Part of one of the things we're doing is we're going to attach a manhole over that existing end wall that's there because it's kind of being eroded, it's falling down. It's just kind of a mess, and so I think we'll get that all cleaned up, and with that, I'm just happy to answer any questions, and
No,
Wait just a second, sir.
we'll get into specific questions in the public hearing part, so if you can just keep explaining, and then we'll have our engineer talk later, too.
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna, for their benefit, because they weren't able to see this is the existing condition site, and this is essentially the tree removal, and this is our construction limits that's shown on the exhibit. So I could just tell you from experience, it's very difficult to go into sites like this and preserve trees and things of that nature just because of the nature of the business of just extending. You're just because of grades and everything, elevations, you put a house here, you got to slope the elevations out and you have to match the existing elevations, and we're matching existing elevations all the way along this perimeter, all within inside the development area, and all in the sense of kind of seeing and knowing where certain tree sizes are and trying to protect that aspect.
Can you talk a little bit about the stormwater plan? Where's the drainage going to go in the different areas and the different directions?
Sure. So the existing cul-de-sac is a high point where we connect on, and so this street is all downhill to basically a point here, which is a low point, and we're proposing a storm sewer catch basin too. It's on one of Kevin's lists, and we're proposing a driveway essentially back to this lot, and this storm sewer follows that driveway, and there's a manhole that turns into this basin. So all of the front yards and half of all these homes, basically all of this one, all will go into this storm sewer and into that pond. The parts of these homes here, in general, the drainage area all kind of goes this way, but only this part of this project would go ultimately in that direction. And these, in essence, will come down through, and there's an existing depression at this location, and that depression takes a certain amount of off-site water. That off-site water is being conveyed through a pipe that bypasses this pond, because in general terms, we don't need to, we have to treat and deal with the water quality, and we have to infiltrate into the groundwater a certain amount of water, and we are doing that with our development. We don't have that requirement for off-site water, except that we need to just simply convey it through the property. And that's what we're doing with this pipe. And so we are collecting the stormwater here to go in this pipe. We are bypassing the pond with another pipe, and then we've, in essence, provided another emergency overflow pipe that essentially would, in the case of all things being full, this would continue and convey the water through a low spot here, which happens to be the same as the floodplain for Lake Malibu, and this comes back to the lake kind of through a very long swale. And again, what we're doing is we're treating the water of this development prior to it discharging into this swale. And this is a little bit of a sedimentation, well, it's a depressional area that we're, in essence, collecting water to bypass, so.
Is there any specific direction of the flow of the hillside down to that pond, or is it directed away from the pond, or is it just naturally flowing?
It's I would call this area is naturally flowing this direction. This pond is really capturing really probably this much of this site. And again, I think if your specific question is up here, this is probably all that would come off of this. And specifically with this house, I think through just good construction practices, I don't see any issues on how we propose that. I think I know Mark came up with a plan to how that house was, and we've come up with the plan that we propose, kind of independent of each other. And so this much of this would end up basically going that way as well. Right now, literally all of that comes down down that site.
So that swale you're talking about directs the water to that pond just on the other side of the lake from Malibu Drive there?
Yeah,
Riverside Drive, I mean?
What's kind of interesting, if you look at an aerial map with topography,
That's what I'm
there's, I think the original river willow bed kind of meandered, and I think it actually came across this bottom of bank and just kind of arced all the way across.
That'll stay there, but that might help a little.
Sure. Can you just hold that for just a quick second, or?
Okay, I'll hold it.
Okay. So there's kind of a bluff line all the way along this area here. And it looks to me, I guess looks to me like this used to be a part of the old river elbow and that happens a lot in streams. They just kind of, all of a sudden they get a really big elbow that bends out, and then the stream finds another more natural path. And so that might have been something prior to the dam, but this is kind of a low wet area on Riverside Drive, and this just kind of curves back all the way up to this point, and this is kind of our discharge point.
And this is an existing swale, is that what you said?
Yep.
Any other questions from the commission members? Project manager? If not, we'll have our village engineer.
Wait,
Oh.
one question. You said that lot 1, the water runoff would run towards Pine Street? The house that's up on the hill?
Yeah,
You
so,
were saying the water from that lot, how that's going to be graded is any runoff would run towards Pine Street and not down the back of the slope.
yeah, yes, in general, how these houses are set and designed, we have elevations for the garage floor and those type of things. The garage, I believe, on this one is set roughly, for illustration, is roughly about 2 feet above Pine Street. So the garage sits up, and, the runoff, the hard surfaces generally of the front part of the house all would drain towards the street in that fashion.
So you're just saying the hard surfaces would run into the storm drain that's already on Pine Street, but the elevation for the grassy or woody part is just,
Yeah, this
slope
this
away?
drops off, and so what we propose here is essentially a retaining wall to give somewhat of a backyard to the house. There would be, depending on the roof line, half the roof would basically come to the back. That's generally all the hard surface that you would see, and it would land in an area that I think is significant for dissipation purposes, and that.
One point of clarification there, that house has its driveway facing Pine Street, is that correct?
That is correct, yep.
Anything else? Thank you.
You bet.
Kevin? So basically, you've been dealing with the project people, you've been dealing with different committees of the village.
Yep.
If you want to kind of summarize, you kind of know what the important questions are.
Sure. So this is, obviously you went through the concept plan at the last plan commission meeting. Basically gave them the go-ahead to start looking at the preliminary plat, putting all kind of the construction plans together. We have looked at it at the Public Works meeting here. That would have been at the last meeting. One of the items that did come out at that particular committee meeting was, wanted to see like a water main loop put in place. There is an existing 6-inch main in between these two lots 10 and 11, in this particular subdivision. Originally, we just had a dead-end main with a cul-de-sac, or at the end of the cul-de-sac with a hydrant. We worked with the city of Hudson just to kind of get their input into everything also. And we went back to the developer and requested that we have an additional 6-inch main that would connect into the existing water line that sits there.
And would you explain what's the advantage of that?
So basically, for looping purposes, it's going to be better for fire flows and for the water quality that's down for these particular homes in this area. Instead of having a real long service line back into this lot number 4, we'll have an actual shorter, a lot less significant length for that service to come off to actually serve that particular house. And they've, with the revisions that we've been going back and forth with, that, what you see tonight is what's been provided. So they do have water main looping as part of the latest plans that are included here. You have a 6-inch main that sits over here. Obviously we'll be connecting onto that. There's an existing 8-inch sanitary sewer manhole. That'll be just extended to about the end of the cul-de-sac. Like Roger said, with the grading that's involved, that particular manhole is somewhat shallow. It's about 5 feet deep. So, as part of one of my comments, some of these lots, just with the topography and the lower levels, they're going to require like a grinder pump that would actually serve the lower levels. The upper levels will have gravity, but anything below that, there'll be like a little injection pump to actually get the sewage up into the, the gravity sewer that sits into the street. Roger talked about earlier, stormwater management, that's something with new developments. They have to treat the water. There's a certain requirement the DNR requires and the village kind of mimics in their ordinances. So there's like a TSS removal is what they call it.
Suspended solids?
Suspended solids, so, anything with salting and sanding and with the roads, the driveways, they have to remove 80% is what's required for new development. It's part. 92.5. Yep, with, they've obviously been through all the modeling, there's wind slam what they use, and they're providing, 92% removal. So well above the minimum of 80% that is required. Runoff, another big thing that, they have to look at is, pre-development, what that flow rate is coming off this whole particular parcel, and after it's developed with all the additional hard surfaces that are gonna go along with the street and the driveways and the buildings. So you have to meet, basically, with the pond, you can't discharge anything more than what the pre-existing conditions are. And that's what, number one, it's being in this area here and along with on the east side of this driveway, like Roger said, there's a depression area that, you can use that facility too for meeting the ultimate discharge off to the particular parcel. So I'll just go ahead and just run through my comments that I put together. With the developer that's going to actually put in all the improvements, past history, what we've done before. The last one, the Derrick subdivision, we're going to require a developer's agreement be in place. So that's, the village attorney will be involved in that, and that'll actually be brought, in front of the village board for approval. There'll have to be a letter of credit that's in place. Typically, it's 125% above what these anticipated improvements costs are going to be. For if some reason, the development was to fall apart, the village would actually have some dollars to use to actually complete the improvements. Should something, a foreclosure or whatever, you would have that in place to actually use those particular funds to close the, complete the improvements that are part of the public improvements within the right-of-way. And that would have to take prior to commencing construction. And then we're going to require that, there's a 2-year warranty period that would run in the favor of the village from the final date of acceptance of the improvements themselves after everything is constructed. The village goes out, inspects them, and they're all up to what, the standards are, what the village ordinances require. Then that would be the commencement date from when the 2-year warranty period would start. Number 3, obviously they need to have all their village, St. Croix County Planning and Zoning, Wisconsin DNR approvals in place. We would want to see those forwarded off to the village, have, records of that before there would be any construction that would actually take place. DNR-wise, there's a notice of intent that would have to be applied for and approved. And then for the sewer and the water main extension, another DNR permit that's required. The stormwater management facility itself is actually going to be owned, operated, and maintained by a homeowners association. So we'll want to see a maintenance plan that's been executed that outlines, the things that, these particular people are going to be responsible for, so that we ensure, number one, that, the infiltration continue as what it was originally constructed for, so that they don't seal up. And then up in this particular area where the existing depression is with these grates, and we want to make sure that those are looked at on a pretty regular basis to make sure that, these don't get any debris in front of them, which would raise up the, levels of the water. Because these 2 lots right here, they have like a walkout structure themselves. So we would want to see a maintenance plan that's in place, and that would have to be forwarded off to the village. In regards to the final plat, when we do get to that stage with these two facilities in place, we would want to see what they call lowest building openings. That's stated on the plat itself, so when people do build these structures, they know what the lowest building opening is. It has to be 2 feet above the 100-year flood elevation for those different stormwater facilities. If we would want to see, the construction specifications that are going to be used to actually put in the public improvements for what type of sanitary sewer, the manholes, the water main, the hydrants, all those types of things. We'd want to see that before any construction does commence. In regards to the stormwater facility, where there's an overflow berm, that's if it gets above the 100-year event, there's an area here where it would discharge over the top. We would want to see that have riprap from the top of it all the way down to the bottom of the apron end wall. So we don't have any erosion issues there if it does get above the 100-year event. At the end of the cul-de-sac, there is one catch basin that's proposed. We feel that there should be another one there to have a dual inlet, just to make sure that we're getting as much water as we can into the pipe that ultimately ends down into the stormwater facility. The infiltration basin, we'd like to see a soil boring in that area, just because of, in relationship to where it's close to the Lake Malibu, just to see kind of where the groundwater elevation is, because they are trying to infiltrate into the ground. So, and that's again another thing that the DNR is going to ask also, but we would want to see a soil boring in that location. The curb and gutter itself is going to be what they call a surmountable. It's like a driveway curb, not like your typical barrier, which has a 6-inch curb head, like you see in the existing subdivision to the east. A lot of new developments, that's what they're actually going to, just because of the driveways per se. Instead of trying to kind of guess where the openings are going to be, they go with a mountable curb. They don't have to go back in and try to, do some repairs and things for if it does change location. So that'll be the low back curb. We just would like to see a detail on that in the construction plans. Lighting wise, that's something we talked about in Public Works. There is one that's proposed on the end of the cul-de-sac. That again is going to be, at the cost of the developer. We would just like to see a detail of that and make sure that the village, is okay with the style that's being proposed. And we talked about the grinder pumps for some of the structures themselves. That just kind of a informational thing for the Plan Commission members. One thing in regards to the HydroCAD modeling, that's stormwater modeling. Just note that overflow elevation is at a 696. It's a little bit different on the grading plan. We just would need to have that corrected. So, and then lastly, with the water main looping, we would want to see a 10-foot utility easement on each side for maintenance purposes. Just so it's wide enough. If we ever had to go in there and do some repair work, that it would be a total of 20 feet wide. So.
That's a lot.
I have a
Yeah.
question for you, Kevin.
Yeah.
Just, all these lots meet our minimum lot size in that zoning district, right?
Yes, correct. So the minimum lot size is, for single-family residential, is 13,000 square feet, and the smallest one that they have is 13,166. So, and I've looked at all the setbacks, front, rear, side, and they all meet your code requirements for that zoning district. And that is shown on one of the on the construction plans on C1.01. There's a dash line that gives you an idea of what the building envelope is.
Oh, okay.
when you take out the setbacks from the property lines. The street right-of-way width, minimum of 60 feet. The width of the street, you require 36 feet from face to face of the curb, and that's all being met, so.
Any of the Plan Commission members have any questions for Kevin?
No, those are all proposed. So there'll be some retaining walls proposed on lot number 4. Yeah, number 1 will have. There's a series of 3 of them in that. The tip, yeah, like Versalock block, MSC wall, they call it. It's all concrete, modular block.
Is the infiltration pond expected to maintain a certain level, water level, or in depth? Or-
Yeah, they have to, as part of the stormwater modeling, they have to look at the 2, 10, and 100-year event. And if you look at some of the structures per se, you'll see like what they call orifices in the manholes, and that's to accommodate the different rainfall events, the 2, 10, and 100. So you ensure that what's going off of the parcel, again, is not greater than what their pre-existing drainage is, how much runoff is coming off. So if you look at the details, you can see like the different stages that they have, whether it's an 8-inch orifice or, 5.5 by 5.5. It's like one of the last pages as part of the construction plans.
Is there a standpipe in the pond to regulate the minimum level? Is that, I thought that's what Tom's question was. Is there a minimum level or an average level?
Yeah, it's part of the
What maintains the level?
outlet structure that they have. Take a look at that.
At the end, the details got pretty hard to follow. If you're not a civil
Yeah, I
engineer.
gotta take a look.
2 feet of dead storage, call it.
Yeah.
Did you say 2 feet?
Kevin, can you repeat what Roger said?
Yeah,
so
so,
we can-
so Roger has about 2 feet of dead storage, figured in. The bottom of the pond is a 690. You have it up to about a 690, 692, yeah.
And the purpose of that is the first flush, which is usually the dirtiest water, goes in the pond, can't get out, just goes there. And the sandy soils and everything else that there, it'll just perk into the ground and replenish groundwater and that type of thing, which is the goal of these.
Roger, can you go up to the microphone?
They're having some problems with the audio, so if you can make sure you speak right into that microphone.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. Kevin's right. We have to do 3 things with stormwater. We have to infiltrate a portion of it into the groundwater as part of any new design, and then we have to treat the suspended solids and remove that, and then we have to control the rate that the water is discharging from the site. And so we're doing all 3 of those, and we have to do it in kind of a specific order, and we have to do it in kind of a specific fashion. So the proposed pond in the middle has about 2 feet of what we call dead storage, meaning that it can't get out no matter what happens because it's just there. And because of the sandy soils and those type of things, that water over a period of time will just infiltrate into the groundwater, and it's suspend, the silts and that will basically stay in the pond itself. Anything above that has a smaller, we control the rates and controls with, a small orifice that basically is just anywhere from, I think we have a 2-inch and a 5-inch and a rectangular, and water gets up a certain size, it goes through a small device that it can only leave so fast. And as it's doing that, it's suspending and it's discharging only at a certain rate, thereby we're able to control all three of the infiltration, quality, water quality, and the rate flow from the development.
Is there, since it's a responsibility of the association members to take care and maintain that pond, is there any predicted or average length of time before they have to deal with it?
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm happy to answer that. Kevin and I actually talked about some of this. You know, a 2-inch orifice, a 5-inch orifice, those things can plug if we're not careful. So one of the things we did in the building of the structure is that we actually lowered the structure itself so that the 2-inch is actually able to be elevated out of the surrounding ground, so it's not down where the dirt is or any of that stuff. It's just kind of, sticking out above ground so that it's visible. I should be able to walk right up and you should be able to see it from a distance, and you should be able to kind of see that, hey, this is plugged, this is that type of thing. So it should be very visible in that nature.
but I guess what I'm more concerned with, at one point, the bottom of the pond will not filtrate.
Sure.
And they'd have to remove that material, the association, and any expected period of time where that process would have to be done.
I'll make a stab at that. It's hard to predict those things because it depends on, well, it could depend on construction practices. It could fail right away, and we would know that by just poor construction practices. I don't see that as an issue because we have a 2-year period and all of this stuff, and we will know that. But in the longer course of things, when the vegetation is established, that, in essence, we're talking, in my opinion, relatively clean water. It's not a parking lot where we're sanding and salting the roads, but this road isn't on anything that requires an excessive amount of that type of maintenance, and that's usually a contributing factor to those things. But let's just say it did. Let's say it plugged. Let's say it is that. And generally speaking, the top surface is what's really plugged, and depending on the potential fix for that is just to merely come in there probably with a small skid steer and just skim off a little bit. Person could even come in with a rotor tilling type device and just do what's called deep tilling of the soil, and that will help loosen it up. And it's similar things that they do to, I want to say maybe septic systems and other things that, mound systems, they'll scarify the soil and do some of that stuff to loosen up the dirt so that it starts to infiltrate again. And that again will be, if it starts to fail, it will become visible because the water won't be seeping down. It won't be, all that is you'll be able to visually see if it's not working.
Thank you.
I guess you've answered a number of my questions, but I think that pond is really, and how it's maintained is one of my biggest concerns, or I think a voice kind of what everyone else is expressing. And then just kind of the homeowners association, we don't, who knows who that is, we don't know what sort of maintenance agreement they're gonna have. And do we have a way of controlling or verifying that through the city engineer, or?
We'll actually get a copy of that maintenance plan that they, will provide to the village. If for some reason it isn't, it's being somewhat neglected, the village can come in and actually do the repairs and then special assess those folks back.
Such the homeowners.
Yep,
Just the homeowners.
Just the
association.
homeowners.
And
That
those
association.
homeowners.
yep. If we do start seeing
No,
some
right.
issues,
No.
yeah. So,
And maybe, Terry, you could best describe this. This is a preliminary plat, and there will be a final plat.
There will be a final plat.
Right, which just means that everything isn't answered, like you said a lot of times. They're gonna do this, and we have to get a copy of the plan.
Yeah.
We get all of that before the final plat.
correct.
Okay, just want to
And
clarify.
a lot of that stuff will be in that developer's agreement too.
Yes.
Yep.
The developer's agreement is a legal document between the developer and the village, a legal contract that defines all of the developer's responsibilities to the village. So things like they have to build the road to a certain standard, they have to have the water main in there correctly, and our engineer will inspect that to make sure those things are done right, and that we have all the easements we need for all of those utilities and things like that. And then eventually those things get dedicated to the village, just like all the other roads and water mains and sewers. Except for the storm sewer, which remains private in this one.
Yep.
I have a couple other questions, if I may.
Sure.
And I know the intention is to remove the cul-de-sac, the existing cul-de-sac. And you've indicated clearly the curb work and the connection details. But I think you've left out the repair of the grading that leads up to the homeowners that are adjacent to where the existing groundwork used to come up to the curb of the cul-de-sac. There's no indication of what you plan to repair there in those yards that are going to be affected. So I'd like to see some indication of your responsibility to restore their yard work.
And it might be hidden in all the text, but it's certainly the intention. And
Yeah,
we're
I
going to
couldn't
do
see-
things
It'd be
right.
nice to have a little dash line and a little, shading or something on that little circle there, so we see it clearly.
We're going to have to remove the entire circular surface.
Yeah.
We're not going to leave a little pie-shaped or moon-shaped, thing out there, but we have to remove all of that. And we have to we replace it with topsoil, and then we seed mulch and restore it back. There's one driveway, and that is on that specific sheet that.
And you
we
show
would-
that extended. You show
Yep,
that,
we
yeah,
would cut,
yep.
we'd have to cut the pavement there and extend that so they would have, they would be restored
Right.
to the road section. There's, that particular property owner, there's gonna be a little, inconvenience, I'm just gonna say, because of the construction to get that done. But, the cul-de-sac, I think, was set up to be temporary in nature
Yeah.
to begin with, and so, but by all means, we would be restoring that to, the condition that we have out there, which is a lawn condition.
Yeah.
And just
W-
one
w-
comment on that too, that's a village street, that cul-de-sac, so the
Yeah.
plat probably reflects that, so that's probably our property until we give it up. And then we
Oh,
would vacate it to the adjoining
The
homeowners.
cul-de-sac itself, yeah.
The existing
The
cul-de-sac.
remaining piece of the cul-de-sac, yeah. What's the duration, do you know, that landowner or the property owner would be disrupted, you think, in terms of that process? Do you have an idea?
Yeah, the way the construction goes, I think the utility connections are away from that driveway, so there's a lot of construction that can happen without any disruption of the driveway and the services. And that can go on quite a lot of construction can happen before we need to do that. It's almost at the final stages, we would come in and saw cut it, and where we're actually building the street going into the development. When I mean that is all the utilities are in, much of the grading is done, and then we're placing gravel, and we'd smooth out the gravel, and when we come in with ready for the curb and gutter, which is a concrete circulating this, that's when we would have to come in and saw cut that. And so they would have a gravel surface all the time through that. And then there might be a disruption of a couple days when we pour a wet concrete there. And we do this all the time. We just don't do it, so it's like, hey, I gotta get out to work, and there's this barrier there, it's like, we give them notification, we suggest maybe we park in the street for a day or two. We can mound the curb with gravel so they can get in and out. Once it ends before the pavement, and once the pavement's done, then, they're back. And so it's quite limited, but again, we would have to work through and discuss, and we would certainly notify them of that.
So I have one more question. It seems like you are doing a lot. You're making a lot of structural and engineering moves to get lot number one buildable. I have a real question about the effect, the effect of that and what it's going to be, what's going to be left. I mean, when you, I can see where you've built a number of retaining walls to get the grade up, and it's a small pad, and I'm not convinced that it's a great lot for anything unless you put something on stilts. It
Well,
might be
I-
even better to build a building on
Yeah,
stilts.
we looked at it, and I just apologize here for a second. Let me just take it.
Grab the microphone. Better grab the microphone, Roger.
Yeah, I just wanted to verify what my thoughts are here.
Yeah, you've got two, it looks like two different tiers of retaining walls at various
Yep.
elevations
Yep.
that I could see on the plan, and
Well, and
you're
our-
getting
our-
a grade
our-
that's,
our-
it's all
our-
20% sloped right now, so everything's going downhill quickly.
Yeah.
So you're gonna have to put a deep wall in that, I'm not sure how you do it.
It's
difficult.
Trump built it.
it may be deceiving, but the reality is that when we come up with, from the street to the garage, and we're up a couple feet, we're actually, from that level, we actually go down about 8 feet to the basement level. And so we're below street level with the basement of the house, and we come out here, and we're showing our wall heights here. This wall at this location is really only 2 feet high.
Is how high?
2.
Okay.
2 feet. And so the reason we did that, or the reason we did the wall, is that it becomes a
You're using the building as a retaining.
yeah, it's an edge. This is it.
Yeah.
They come out when they make the pad and everything else, they follow a contour line, and there it is, there's an edge. Now, on this level, we did this primarily and this is a 3-foot wall, because there's a little bit of this kind of comes into the street and back out, and I think this may have had something to do with an old swale, maybe, I don't know if that was, you know where I'm talking about there? Was this the old utility location there, the storm sewer? And this looks somewhat pragmatic as it exists, but we're putting, in essence, a 3-foot wall, and this really is designed just to be more of a sitting. It's just, we're looking at it, how would I want to live here? And they would be sitting basically below street grade and essentially overlooking the entire woods. It's really just kind of a patio area.
Parapet is.
Yeah, yeah, I think it would be a
I'd put
highly
mine there, that's for
usable.
sure.
And so it kind of discourages them with the retaining wall. It just, hey, this is where my yard stops. This is where we mow. This is where everything else. And we've done the same thing on this side. And really it's for the sole purpose. We don't really need to do this, but when we sit there and look at basically all the environmental factors that we want to try to take into the essence of a design, then it just becomes a delineation of, there it is. And then what we've done,
Can you describe lot 4 again for me? I mean, so that, is it a retaining wall uphill?
correct, yep.
Okay.
And the thing that we've done after that, and when we go to the final plat stage, then all of this area here that's sloped, we create a conservation easement
Sure, yep.
that ultimately preserves that. And a big thing with a conservation easement is how does that work? Well, and I've done this for a long time, and you come back to something and say, well, boy, this guy's all over the place, and you talk to the landowner, he says, well, I don't know, I know I got a conservation easement, but, show me where it is. Well, here, it's very visible. And that's really kind of the point to how we did that, and why we're making kind of a decision of how the lot should ultimately be used by delineating it with a retaining wall system.
So, Roger, I got a couple questions there, too. I believe you indicated that because of the grades, you weren't going to be able to go as deep with the water lines, and you're going to insulate Is that you were gonna be insulating
We're insulating the sanitary sewer.
sanitary sewer?
Yep.
Okay,
The water main is pressurized, so we could put that wherever we want.
okay.
So this, even though the street's going downhill, the sanitary sewer is, sounds funny to say this, going uphill, but the pipe is going downhill even though the ground is going uphill.
And just to clarify, what lots were you expecting they would most likely have a injection pump or a grinder pump?
I believe it's 3, 5, 6, and 7. And what that is, again, is we've done all pressurized sewer systems in houses. We've done quite a bit of it. In this is that if this was the basement of the house, the pipe might come in somewhere in the wall. And so the toilet in the basement needs to lift it up. Now, those type of systems are very simple. You can go to Menards and you can get one, and it's really quite simple. And then everything above, you flush the toilet, just goes gravity. So the difference in having the whole system go into an injection pump is that, let's say the power goes out. Well, as far as I tell, the water tower still has water, and I turn on the faucet, it still has faucet. I can use all the appliances, but my injector pump won't work. Well, the upper floor of the house, and we've really seen no really issues with homeowners kind of understanding what system they have, is that they can use their facilities and everything else that works. And it's just you got to tell Junior not to go down in the basement, and, it's an inconvenience at that time. In a full injector, where everything has to be injected out, is they can start getting fairly sophisticated with everything from telemetry, which basically apps that tell your phone, hey, your pump's not working and your system's full, battery backups, and all this kind of stuff, larger storage areas and things of that just start to get really kind of complicated. And then we get into city situations where maybe that shouldn't be in the house, maybe that should be out of the house, and then who maintains that, who doesn't maintain that. That starts to get a little more complicated. But in this kind of system, we had a small cabin up north. We had exactly this type of thing. It's never been a problem.
No, that was,
I have one. I neglect to go down to Bluebird Court to see what kind of curb and gutter that's currently there. Isn't it a regular curb and gutter that's there, but the proposed cul-de-sac is gonna be a surmountable? Wouldn't that look strange, having a regular curb and gutter and then a surmountable?
We've seen that in other communities, especially with.
On the same extension of road?
Yes. Yeah, but I mean, with the new development, I mean, we see a lot of these. They're going with a mountable curb. A lot of it's dictated by the driveways, not exactly knowing where they're gonna be placed. Instead of going in and putting barrier and kind of guessing, how wide it's gonna be, where the location's gonna end up being. A lot of them have been going to the mountable curb just to take that guesswork
Kevin, how do
out.
they transition from the regular to the surmountable? What's that look
There's
like?
usually, about 5 or 10 foot transition period in there. That goes from the 6-inch high stuff down to, typically with mountable stuff, it's about 2.5 to 3 inches. So you're at 3 inches of,
You've got a drop of about 3 inches?
Yeah, about a drop
Maybe
of-
4?
yep. And you usually do that in about 10 feet or so. So it's not real abrupt.
So you end up with a small speed bump.
No, it's on the curb. It's just the curb.
Yeah, the back of the curb.
But I mean, when you
Yeah, the
jump
back
onto,
of the
when you
curb.
drive onto the curb?
If you were riding on
Yeah.
your skateboard.
Yeah.
maybe,
Yeah.
The one curb has a vertical face that's a half a foot high, and then the other curb is, we're proposing a 3-inch lip. Generally, we found there's, most of the typicals is 4-inch, but we find that's a little jumpy, and just that extra inch makes a big difference. But, so you're coming down 2 inches, and then that high back of a half a foot is a half a foot thick too, so it's like a square. But so to transition, this starts to go out because the curb would be centered, the flow line would now be centered as opposed to half a foot from the back, so it kind of just does that. And it's just so, and it's pretty gradual and and generally speaking, if you go around town, you probably see a lot of them if you really kind of start looking.
Anyone else?
All my questions have been answered.
This side? Okay.
Thank you.
We'll stick around.
Yeah, Roger, why don't you stay up there?
We have a couple dozen people here, which is unusual for our plan commission. We talked earlier that we'll be going into public hearing soon. We were talking about how we might streamline this and yet answer all your questions, and so we would propose that if anyone who'd like to speak, has something to say, keep it to 3 minutes or less because of the people, go up to the podium and do that. But if we get to the point where we have a lot of questions, it might be easier and better for everyone involved. We have an extra portable microphone, and the people in the audience can grab the microphone, and one of these gentlemen can be up at the podium and answer that. So with that being said, I'll entertain a motion to go into a public hearing.
I move to.
We have a motion, is there a second?
I second.
Okay, all in favor of going into the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are in public hearing at 8:03. Thank you very much. Before we start, I do have 2 letters from people who were not able to attend tonight. I will quickly read them into the record. Alice Hayward, dear North Hudson Plan Commission, I am unexpectedly unable to make the meeting regarding the proposed Artisan North. As a resident of this lovely neighborhood, North Hudson, I am strongly opposed to the plan to jam 8 lots in such a small space. The developer's obvious disregard for our neighborhood was evident when no notice was sent out about the loud and disruptive demolition of the trees at the end of Bluebird that began as early as 7 a.m. many mornings a few weeks back. This meeting should not have been held before that work began. The fact that the village didn't find it necessary to inform everyone on Meadow Drive North and Bluebird of this meeting implies they wanted little opposition to the development plan. This is a charming, close-knit neighborhood. Please be thoughtful rather than greedy, and don't ruin it. Alice Hayward, 316 Meadow. And the other letter, dated April 28th, Village of North Hudson Plan Commission. I am Karen Miller and own 3 acres at 741 Riverside that will be directly affected by Artisan North 8-home subdivision. Artisan North's first foundation sits on the edge of a steep decline, and my land has several home lots plotted downhill directly in the path of their water runoff. Without erosion control in place and a watershed plan in place, why is this project allowed to proceed? Even if a retaining pond is planned, substantial grading and overflow provisions should be in place. I strongly urge this commission to halt the progression of the Artisan North plan until I have my engineer and attorney review the erosion and watershed plan to make sure it doesn't devalue my land or affect already plotted lots. Karen Miller, 1303 Crisview Drive. Now, we are in public hearings. I won't have you answer it then, other than the part about the plans and everything you heard. We talked about a lot of that. So that being said, does anyone have any comments? Would anyone like to speak? And if, sure, please go to the podium and state your name and address, if you would.
I'll be the guinea pig.
And speak clearly, because they said sometimes they can't hear from the microphone.
All right, I'm Carolyn Grunke, and my husband Mitch and I live on the cul-de-sac in question at 904 Bluebird Court. Just to kind of give you our perspective, we moved in there in 1990, and our first winter there, we discovered that the cul-de-sac is actually tilted towards our house, so we get an ice dam every year. And we came to the village and were told the cul-de-sac was temporary, so it couldn't be repaired, and that was 1990. And the village has done a great job of making sure it's plowed so that we don't have many problems. So, but knowing that this development has been coming for a long time, and then all of a sudden looking out the window this spring, after that sign has been up for 2, 3, 4 years, it just was a very big surprise. Not that we didn't know it was coming. I just wanted to clarify a couple things, make sure I heard it right. So with the taking out of the cul-de-sac and our driveway and all of that, that'll be covered under the developer's agreement that is between the village and the development.
Yes.
So we don't have to deal with that. It'll be turned over to us when that's all complete.
Correct.
So that there isn't anything that we have to worry about between us and Landstead or,
Correct. You'll have just a normal road when it's finished.
perfect. And then my only other question is, with the building, just some concerns or comments about the staging of the trucks. Yeah, the first couple of weeks, our garbage cans were completely blocked by, the trucks, understandably so, have to be staged on the cul-de-sac, but we still need to be able to get our garbage picked up and get our mail. It was not a problem today. It actually wasn't a problem last Wednesday either, but just some concerns about that and, you know, question about at what point will the trucks be able to go further back in there so that everything isn't staged on the cul-de-sac. We still have kids that ride their bikes and it's a quiet, you know, there's only 3 houses on Bluebird Court. So there are kids that come down there and play and just kind of how long can we expect that the trucks will be there as opposed to being able to be staged further into the development. And I guess those are all my questions.
Actually, thank you very much. Would somebody answer her 2 concerns, please?
Roger or Mark or somebody want to talk to about these
The one
things?
about make sure that the grading is right so that her driveway is all fixed. Go up to the microphone and.
I'm-
Which side of the?
Would you use the microphone, please, Roger?
we're on this side. We're the only house on the cul-de-sac.
Yeah, so we'll be talking because we need to extend your driveway. That was what we were talking about
Okay.
before.
Oh,
And
you're
so
doing- okay, good.
that's, you know, we will try to make things as smooth and easy as we can. I think the biggest thing, once we have, you know, enough access coming into the site that a lot of the, I think there's several things. One is local contractor, local people working. So, you know, it's in essence, vehicles aren't, you know, going to be there overnight. That shouldn't be an issue. That's not what this is about. But once we can get into the site with vehicles, then they'll be in the site with vehicles. I think this is a very small site, and I think it will go reasonably quick. I don't know, Kevin, you think it's 45 days is, you know?
Is there going to
Yeah.
be,
Gary,
is there
Gary?
going to be some temporary graveling? Right now, there's standing water. The Aero Building truck that came yesterday was struggling a little bit to unload and get their materials back there because of the standing water right at the entrance.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me right now that there's some of that. You know, your driveway is here, so I think this is pretty reasonable to be used for the construction side because certainly your access is unimpeded from that standpoint. Once this excavation really starts occurring, then everything is kind of downhill, so that water should just
Oh,
keep on going.
The standing water just appears to be why the trucks can't get further back in right now.
Okay.
So I'm asking if there's temporary gravel that's going to be put in there, or will it wait until the street's put in?
Right, I drove in there right before the meeting, and the lumber was just dropped off there yesterday. And so the big trucks that's gone in, now we won't need big trucks till the concrete trucks come in, which will be a while yet. Actually, most of them have been there already too. So we can definitely put some more gravel on there. One of the nice things about having that water in there is, should people drive in the undisturbed area and get mud on their wheels, that water washes them off really well. So by the time they get to the road, we haven't had to sweep that road at all. It stayed really nice because of that little pond area. And there is rock down beneath it. There's pea gravel down beneath that entire pond. So you can drive, even with two-wheel drive, you can drive in and out with no problem. So it looks worse than it is, and I know it's a mess right now. But that is kind of the nature of the beginning of construction, and before long, it'll look real nice. So, and we will also, I'll make sure that our subcontractors, all the people working on the house, do not block you in and park on the other side of the cul-de-sac. So, thanks
Mark,
for bringing that to our attention.
also the concern about the mailbox and the garbage,
Yep,
so you don't block those either?
exactly.
Yeah, the first couple of weeks I had to, when I stopped at home at lunchtime, I had to move the garbage cans because there were so many trucks in the cul-de-sac they'd left me room to get out of my driveway, but they couldn't pick up the garbage. The
Well-
truck couldn't get in there.
I'm sorry, I didn't know about that before now, but
Yeah, wasn't a problem
won't
today.
occur again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I get a clarification then? Her first point about the way the cul-de-sac is and the water going to her house, your grading will fix that?
Yeah, I think we'll specifically take a look at that, but
Okay.
I'm not aware that
Okay.
there's should be any issue with that. Part of the problem is this, that everything is shed from here way out to here, and with the curb and gutter, it's all gonna just, it's gonna stay in the street, and then you'll have grass, between the curb and your yard should look no different than basically much of what's up down the street that's there now.
Wonderful. Anyone else have a,
So I would separate this from comments to questions, I guess. So if you just have comments, let's do that. And if there's questions, well, okay, yeah, go ahead.
Am I okay?
Yeah, you're,
You're okay.
you just want to keep it
Next.
orderly and keep it flowing. That's the main
Yeah.
thing.
Hi, I'm Marty Davies. I live at 803 Riverside Drive with my husband Ray, in the property that's south,
right out.
right here. So I have a couple of questions. First question is, this was hard to read on the actual copy, but it says proposed easement, and I'm wondering what that is. It's actually between these two properties.
I don't believe there isn't there might be an existing easement there or something.
There's not an existing easement there.
We're not proposing
read that.
anything off in that direction on your property.
Okay, because it shows up on multiple copies, so I want to verify that that's clear, that there is no easement, because this is the lake here, and this is between myself and Burnley's property. And so I just want to make sure that
No,
there is no
there is no
easement.
easement there.
No.
Originally, we'd hoped we could have an easement there because we thought Burnley owned property to the south of Riverside Drive on the lake.
Right.
And when his father dedicated that property to the village, they did indeed own property there. But then two things happened, erosion and the lake level came up. And so now the right-of-way of Riverside Drive owns the frontage, Burnley doesn't. So there's no reason to have that easement
Right.
over there. So
Okay,
that, if that's still on there, it's erroneous.
Okay, I just wanted to
So
clarify
that dashed line and dotted line that she was talking about, that really, there's
That is
nothing
not there anymore, right?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So another question I have is, it shows here that there's a 20-foot trail between lots 7 and 8, and I'm questioning what that is, please.
And I was looking through our plan. I don't think we have anything on the proposal. That might have been one of the original concepts, I'm guessing, that had that there. But we have, on all these property lines, we have a utility. It's very standard to have surrounding the edge of the property I'm going to call it a 10-foot drainage and utility easement, I think is.
On either side, right?
And so that's standard for, and a lot of what that is the telephone company needs cable TV or that type of thing. A lot of those things kind of happen in that area. So, and part of that is to, depending on what the neighbors do and the lot owners do, is just there's a means of dealing with drainage plus the utilities. So it's just a standard.
My question was more,
That's
why
what
is
they're
it called a
talking about.
trail as
Trail
opposed to a utility easement? Because it said on one of the copies, it actually says a 20-foot.
It has
Yeah.
several things it could be.
Yeah.
It does say
There's a
that.
trail there, yeah.
Trail, utility, and drainage, is 20 foot.
Typical. And it says typical, so it's pointing to that one, but I think it's
Yeah,
referencing to all of them.
Somebody types all this stuff in, we lay out all these lines, that's not intended to be a
Okay.
trail easement,
Okay.
so.
Well, thanks for that
Yep,
clarification.
sorry about that, we'll get
It's a-
that
It's a
removed.
20-foot utility and drainage easement, not
To-
a trail.
That would stay, that was the intent.
Okay, and then just one more clarification, because both on the websites with the Landstead as well as a website that's called Venture Near, it says that there's possible access to Lake Malibu, and on the Venture Near one, it says that it's actual lake access. So I just want to clarify that these properties that are proposed, they will have no access to Lake Malibu, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Unless they go to the boat launch.
Right, exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes.
Yes, my name is Steve Strandy, and I'm here as an additional representative for Karen Miller, whose letter that you read. And she asked if I could go over and look at the property and see the initial pad that had been put in place. And upon walking through, you raised the issues about the runoff of the water. The initial pad that's there has probably a 50 to 20-foot gap between the back of the slab to the adjoining property, which if we were to turn this way, the property is over here, and your first piece, I think, is about in here. But there is only 15 to 20 feet there between the back of the slab, and then it's built up probably, I don't know, 3 to 4 feet, maybe 5 feet. And so does the water then run off the house and run to the adjacent lot?
Who can answer that?
Which, this is lot here. This,
Lot 7.
lot 7, yeah. Lot 7 is somewhat unique in the development because it's a slab-on-grade lot, and that actually elevates it a little bit more than one with a basement or a lookout. But the in essence, there's kind of a ridge line here. All of this water comes this way prior to this development. In the wooded area comes this way. When we're done, only in essence, portion of that will come into in the play on and all of it's being directed here, which will ultimately go in that direction.
So that is correct. Then that when this reaches its capacity, it will overflow and go around, which is around the adjacent piece of property here
Correct,
too,
yep.
and go back over down to. And is there an earthen dam here that's kind of in the swale towards the end before it can jump to get into Lake Malilu?
I think there's a culvert that connects in between Lake Malibu and kind of the backwaters, so it equalizes the two levels. You know, like a culvert, CMP, corrugated metal pipe,
Right.
that sits up underneath Riverside Drive.
But it seemed to me that there was also the swale that runs across along here also had a crossing. It looked like a dam for someone who has a small parcel of land with a shed next to the 741 Riverside, and it looked like there was some way for them to get across to this other small piece of land that they have on the edge of that lot.
That wouldn't be anything with us on that.
So is any of the water that comes this way then needing to be allow the sediment to get out before it goes into Malibu?
Well, we're treating all the sediment, taking it out with this pond. There's an existing storm sewer pipe that's already from Pine Street that goes across this property and discharges kind of in a kind of a messy way because the pipe comes down really steep and just kind of when it discharges it messes up the ground and then it continues on. All that's kind of happening right here. So we're actually proposing to put a manhole over that and then stub out a flat pipe to slow the velocity down at this discharge point. And that will take this, it's actually this off-site water that comes through here now that will connect onto this pipe and discharge it this way. And so our goal with that is to kind of clean up the erosion that's occurring there
this
today.
This being west.
And that being west, yep.
Yep. And I guess from her standpoint, she'd like to get a copy of the plans so that she can study those and have, as was mentioned in the letter, to look at that, to see how it might affect the plots and the lots that she's laid out as well. And I guess the process from where we are to today to when it would be a finalized plot where it's not changeable, how long is that process?
Do you want to answer that, or?
They're gonna have to get their approvals in place, so they gotta get, St. Croix County Planning and Zoning, there's a permit that we need. Wisconsin DNR for the water main and sewer extension along with the notice of intent. Those have to be in place before, there'll be any construction that started. And then the developer's agreement is another instrument that needs to be executed, so.
So I think what she's looking for is how long of a time does she have to become as knowledgeable as she can about the impacts of this before it becomes a finalized?
But I think
Say,
the city process, let's say we submit it tomorrow, which I tell you, I'm not able to do, but the city has at least, I believe, a 30-day process in the review of the final plat, the developer's agreement and that stuff. And so between that period, you know, we could be as maybe aggressively as soon as 2 weeks before we submit, but I don't know that that would fall in sync with the village process. So I'm saying maybe 45 to 60 days, this would be back through the process. And I guess I want to say one thing. Karen did call me, and I kind of, we're really busy right now, and so I kind of talked to Mark and Gary and just kind of, and they said, well, I should call her back. And I did call her back. I just left her a voice message. And so we're happy to have those discussions. But I just wanted you to know that I did reach out. And I generally ask permission to talk to, because it's really, we just have a plan how we want to address things and how we want to make sure, and we're on the same board of what, and understand the issues as well. And so they've asked me to, and so I'm happy to reach out to either you or her and explain things as best we can.
Yep, and she's back in town now, so she would be more easy to get a hold of too, so.
So we basically are planning on a couple of retention basins on the back of Lot 7, one on the north and one on the southwest corner of that structure we're building. And Kevin has done Roger has done the stormwater calcs of how much impervious surface is on that side of the roof and how much water will be shed on that side. And our retention basins will be more than adequate to allow that water to perk into the ground. And we want to maintain
So that'd be right over here?
it's on Lot 7, so right here and right here, we would have retention basins. And so,
Yeah, I'd like to kind of address that, because we talked about it, and I said, you know, we have maybe 1,200 square feet of roof that slopes in that direction. And so in a kind of a mini depressional area, we can just kind of similar to we have here where we have a dead storage, we could actually capture from the roof, you'd go into a gutter, and from the gutter it goes in a downspout. We could actually capture that portion in the downspout in two smaller little sub-basins, and quite frankly, I already talked to Mario about it. I said you could put some plants on it, you can make basically a landscape feature, and we, you know, it's kind of a good neighborly thing, and he talked about maybe even putting in the restrictive covenants or whatever on the house, saying that has to stay there, more or less. And so that was kind of talked about in added insurance. And we, you know, I want to be clear, we had a big swale through here at one time, and it really, it took out all of these trees. And we said, well, this is, you know, and you know, we're allowed a certain amount of discharge. We're allowed the existing discharge to go off the site. And so by putting these little infiltration basins on each side of the house, you know, that would capture that.
and that's planned for all the property alongside Karen's on the west side.
That abuts, yep.
So these are like rain gardens, small rain.
Yeah,
Not really rain gardens, but small infiltration basins.
they're the same. That's the buzzword. And so I think something of this size and nature doesn't have to have a bunch of horns and whistles. I think it's just could be kept very simple, because it's essentially it's the homeowner's thing with a,
Right.
you know, some means like that. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.
Anyone else have a comment?
Hi, I'm Ray Robbins. I also live at 803 Riverside Drive, and I just have one question or on Outlot A, right here. Would it be possible to make that an easement for the Burnley property? We currently share a driveway, And if he had an easement off of Bluebird Court, in the future, he would be able to put his own driveway in off of Bluebird. And he's expressed to me that for whoever buys the house in the future, that would be for me to deal with that possibly. So I would just like to know if that's possible to make an easement in there, so that if the new owners, when they have new owners, it could alleviate some issues.
Let me ask you guys one question. Who owns Outlot A, or who will own Outlot A? The homeowners
Landstead.
association?
Landstead,
Your company will
Right.
own Outlot A.
exactly.
What for?
There's a
What's
chance
your
that
thought?
someday, if Burnley sells, that there'd be another lot there. There's a chance that he would actually split his property up. So that's kind of the reason for that. Don't know that it'll ever happen, but
Can you
Go ahead,
go up to
go to
the
the microphone, please.
podium?
So this was originally was a brother and sister that owned this property, that many of you know that. And so we actually have, we
fine.
give, yeah, okay. We give Mr. Burnley it's a right-of-way access to that area. And so I have some concerns then about additional property back behind there, because you're talking about, was it a minimum square footage for this 13,000 square feet, or am I getting this correct?
lot.
Per lot? So I guess I would like some consideration shown to that, because there is an issue now with this driveway access that we share. And so would just like a little bit more discussion about this Outlot A, and I'd like to know what the actual plans are around that before we move further on that, because that impacts the value of our property and our investment, as well as your investment in Mr. Burnley's. I think that's only fair to ask this as part of this discussion.
I would like to comment on that from the village's standpoint. That's a private matter between private parties, and the village can't really interfere in Outlot A. You know, there's nothing on this plat that, to the village's standpoint, involves that property.
Right.
And as long as they don't touch that property, you know, and as long as this meets all the state regulations on plats, there's not really much we could force them to do with Outlot A.
And I understand that. But and then maybe I misunderstood, when you were talking about a minimum size lot, 13,000.
For building.
For building, and I'm talking about building off of there, and you were talking about additional lot off of there, because right through here, back here,
Right.
this is what you're talking about there.
correct.
Does that also have to have a 13,000 minimum square foot if it's coming off of this existing?
Of course, if you want it to be a buildable lot, it would have to be a minimum of 13,000 square feet.
Yeah, because an outlot is a non-buildable parcel.
Mm-hmm.
So they would have to, you know, obviously come in and survey this out and create one lot that's greater than 13,000 square feet. They would combine outlot number A with whatever the line ends up
Right.
being to meet that.
And they would have to have some sort of ownership or agreement with
Correct.
that party in order to
Right.
do that.
So help me with this part. What is the actual, just rough dimensions on a lot that's 13,000 square feet? Help me with that
Depends
part.
on the shape, but-
Yeah.
There's one right,
Lot
Lot
7.
Lot 7.
Lot 7.
So it's, what is it?
What's the square root of 13,000?
I don't know.
it shows on this plan.
About 114 feet square.
It is outside of our purview.
Yeah,
So these are the dimensions.
but
105 feet.
Sure.
it's something you
Okay,
can
so there's-
discuss,
so
but
there-
it's not
There could
in what we're talking
technically
about tonight.
be
So however you want to,
another house put in there,
Correct.
yes.
Yep, back in here.
So I just want to clarify, that's not part of this original plan, but it sounds like you have some future plans to add one more house back to this development. It may not be called the same thing under Artisan North, but I just want to be clear for all of us here that it sounds like there's an additional house that's potential in
There
this.
could be in the future, that's not a
Right.
given, but we want to
Correct.
keep the option open.
Okay. So is it possible that we can have some dialogue outside of this meeting regarding this before you move forward on that? Can I ask you to do that with us?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else, Ray?
And just one other question. A tremendous amount of work has been done already, and I keep hearing that plans need to be approved, but construction is already moving forward. So I'm concerned about, we have a retention pond that's going to go in to catch all the silt and everything that's going on. What is going to be in place while construction is going on to keep the water from going to Lake Malibu?
Sure, I'd like to make one comment on that, and then they can address the actual question, which is what's gonna happen, but that one house has a building permit, and it's on one lot, and so it by itself is just one private property lot, and they're building one house on it, so the village had no input on that. We do have input on a subdivision, so that's what we do have input on, but one residential lot where they build one house, we don't have a lot to say about that, other than meeting setbacks and things like that. So, but your question about the water, I think they could address that, what they're gonna do with this one lot.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to say that I was not out there today. I did get here in time to see that, but my understanding is some erosion control is already out there and in that aspect, and I think the construction now is going to be limited to kind of the areas that are already been disturbed. For the most part, I believe.
Right,
that's
we do have silt fence around the lot, and we're planning on maintaining erosion control throughout the building process, just like any other project, so.
So silt fence, just so you know, is basically a barrier that is trenched into the ground that when runoff comes up to it, it's impervious, so it doesn't leak through, and it's designed to hold sediment within the construction limits is basically what that's for.
It's usually that black vinyl looking stuff.
Okay, go back up to the microphone if you want further clarification, thank
It
you.
was I just wanted to clarify that until all final approval, all permits have been done, that construction will be just limited to the one house that started, and no other clearing or construction will be going on. Thank you.
Well, they're allowed to cut trees.
Well, I would clarify that a little bit. If someone wants to cut trees down on their
Right.
own property, the village has not
Right.
much to say about that either.
The house construction is limited to one,
Yeah.
but they can cut a tree down on their property if they want.
Oh, and I.
In anticipation of whatever reason they want to cut down a tree, you know.
Yeah, that just, no more ground disruption, no more continuing forward clearing.
But, yeah,
We have
They would need this approved, and they would need building permits
Yeah.
for that.
Yes, ma'am.
Couple questions.
Name and address,
I'm
please.
sorry, Brooke Rolson. I live at 307 Meadow Drive North. First thing I'd like to say is, if anybody from the board has not walked that property, please do so. It's important for you to see how wet and swampy it is, and how much concern we do have for the runoff and for the lake and for our own properties. Because if what they're proposing fails, am I going to have my basement flood, my backyard full of water? Now, a couple other items I'd like to ask is, we know that Riverside is in pretty rough shape. The big trucks are going to make it even worse. Going in through our cul-de-sac, which is our small little neighborhood where our children play outside on the street, and we have a very close-knit community. What you're asking us to do is to let you put another neighborhood in our neighborhood, because you're coming in only through our cul-de-sac. There is no other way for you to add any other road. Is that correct? Because that's what I'm hearing. So, those are a lot of things. I know I'm kind of nervous, so I'm kind of beating you on that. And then for assessments, you know, are we going to get assessed for the fixing of Riverside and our roads? And are we going to be assessed for any sewer that's going to be put in there? We're not going to see that at all.
No.
Our taxes won't change in any aspect?
All the improvements are gonna be paid by the developer.
Okay,
Yep,
so
sewer,
one of the other concerns too is the big trucks with our kids. I have my grandkids come and play. Our neighborhood is loaded with kids. And you know what they do? They play outside, they ride their bikes. We've already had one neighbor who stopped a truck from the Zappa company, and say, can you please slow down? And you know what was said? It's illegal for kids to play in the street. That's how come we have a bad taste in our mouth. And so we need to work together as a community. And maybe, I'm not opposed to development, but let's compromise. Maybe 4 homes, so we don't have to deal with all this crazy, runoffs and basins and things. And, what is the aspect of our environment if it doesn't work? We have all the migratory birds. The turtles come up, and they come into my neighborhood and, lay their eggs. They're coming in through that area. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration. Any aspects on what we can do?
Well, I guess I'm going to try to address some of them. The village, through kind of a long process, has developed zoning ordinances, comp plans to kind of address the overall development pattern of the village, regardless if it's right here or if it's other parts of the village. And those are offset through property rights and other things, and similar lot sizes and those type of things. So when we come in and look at kind of a development, we look at what's a reasonable use of the property and a reasonable use of the conditions of the property and the layout of land and those type of things. And at the same point is all of this is kind of this balance between frankly, a lot of things are allowed by a property owner to do on their property, but at the same time, we're trying to be cognizant of what these things are or can be. And as far as I can tell, this has been kind of zoned for this type of housing for a very, very long time. And over the period of time, as development has occurred, the cul-de-sac that this leads to was set up, and actually the cul-de-sac was itself temporary in nature because the plan was ultimately for all this to kind of continue, and properties have been sold and purchased and those type of things under the premise of what is the zoning code and comprehensive plan of the village and, the general nature of the development pattern. And it's kind of, I understand what you're saying, and we get into this all the time, and this is generally what we call an infill development, and they're becoming a little bit more and more common because it's the city limit sizes are kind of contained, and this type of stuff that kind of goes back and forth all the time. But the reality of the site is that it's been set up and geared to ultimately be developed, and we're trying to develop it in a most responsible way that we can.
Okay. I'm not happy about it, obviously, because I'm ultimately concerned about our neighborhood as a whole, and adding all the additional traffic and emergency vehicles if needed, with one inlet and one outlet.
Well, and I think we all have to try to be reasonable, and I think we're hearing concerns about if it's a lumber truck that comes zipping in, it's too fast and needs to be somewhere else and is kind of rude and not there are you can it's not that I'm. The last thing we want is to have you call the village and the village calls us. That's really the last thing.
Last thing we want is a child hit.
Same here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, safety first.
Safety first.
Safety first, absolutely. And if there is an obvious safety issue out there, then it needs to be addressed. There's no one here wanting to propose anything that we feel is unsafe and certainly a detriment. We really need to be cognizant of that.
One quick question on the homeowners association. So with the extension of Bluebird going in, I have had the unfortunate opportunity to live in a neighborhood that had a homeowners association and CC&Rs. and it wasn't pleasant for a lot of people who had children. But will our kids be able to ride their bikes in there, or will the homeowners association have an option to say that is off limits for the kids?
The roadway is a public roadway.
Okay.
It will be just.
Okay.
Yep, yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we
Just
and
want to
we
clarify
re-
that
we
from
re-
my own mind,
Yeah.
because I have had the opportunity, like out west, where, I mean,
Yeah.
you
We're-
get one person complaining and it just makes more problems. Okay.
And we're really, really trying to keep the homeowners association as simple
Easy.
as possible. And like I said, the things they need to maintain are visible and seenable and that type of thing. And that it's just quite small in nature in terms of
Okay. All right,
what we're
thank you.
asking them to do.
One comment I'd make is when I first saw the drawing, one thing that I was happy with was we mentioned minimum lot size is 13,000 square feet, and one of the lots is 13,000 something, but then after that, they're 50% or 100% more than that, so it's not like they're jamming them in like in my neighborhood, where I live in North Hudson.
Hello, Dan Bell. I live right here, 724 Pine Street. So we live at the top of the hill. So my question is, 20 feet off the back of my house is that slope. Yes, this might be a 33,000 square foot,
Yeah.
but most of that is not usable at all. So if you haven't walked the top lot 1, come on out to my backyard. I'll give you a pop. Come and see how steep that slope is. So I'm very concerned about house number 1, because on one of the maps that I looked at this afternoon, it's sitting at all the front corner setbacks because there's no room there. When we say retaining walls, we might think they're pretty, but they're being built there because it's holding back the earth. So that house might be 8 feet below the street level, but it's being built in the middle of a hill. Stilt is not, it's the reality of that spot there. So, I mean, I'm very concerned about that house because we bought our property 4 years ago, looking at our property going, we both grew up in the country going, this is like living in the country with the convenience of living in town. So, we're a little selfish going, we're losing that with that lot development. The homeowners association, is there anything else like that that's being proposed in this community? Because what I'm hearing is we're asking these people to be responsible for that property.
They know that when they buy it.
30 years down the road, when half the people in this room, sorry, no offense, are no longer sitting here, and those people have defaulted, it's going to come back to the city or the village. I'm just looking and saying, that just seems like a very, very weird arrangement that, I understand a condo complex, a townhome complex, but to say this neighborhood gets to have their own homeowners association to make sure that their retention ponds and their water runoff is going to be maintained for eternity is very concerning to me. What happens when they don't? Well, the good old village has to come in, and yes, they can assess it, but that's just a very alarming thing to say. So how does that get maintained? And if we don't have anything like that in the village already, are we starting a steep slope where now every little development in a 4-acre lot here wants to come in and say, hey, this is how we can get around all these details. They can kind of form their own little association. Hopefully they'll manage it. So I guess, if you haven't seen the slope, that's a concern of mine with retaining walls. If you got to build retaining walls, you're holding something back. And then that homeowners association.
Comment on the,
I think two things. First on the homeowners association, it's very common these days to have some kind of homeowners association, and all it is really a vehicle to kind of have the residents kind of take somewhat of a burden off the village. And so these easements that we have in here are also in the favor of the village. And so if we didn't have a homeowners association, like almost all the other subdivisions that have occurred over time, the village ends up having answer backyard drainage things, other this, that type of thing, and they come in and there is no vehicle for their maintenance. And so through the developers agreement, through the purchasing of the lots and those type of things, it is already kind of written out, how this is supposed to function and how it will ultimately be maintained. And from that standpoint, yes, sometimes homeowners associations are difficult and they might not be doing right, but it also is a vehicle that allows the village to step in and, theoretically assess or do things to make sure that things are being maintained properly. And so it's just really more of an additional vehicle, but it puts basically the people buying into this kind of as the first line to maintain and be responsible for this. That's really kind of the big part of that. I know we've looked at this. I've built on a lot of heavy slopes and things of that nature all over St. Croix County and western or parts of the Twin City metro area. I looked at this, pretty closely. I know it works. I know we are tight. We specifically put it tight to the setback lines because and it has sewer service to it. It has many things that's kind of already there. The house may not needs to be as large as we're showing it. We're showing it as a kind of the standard building site that Landsted has as a pad width. I think there could be, depending on what house ultimately goes there, we're trying to set basically the maximum limit of what this can be, and then they would have to fit inside that. And so that's kind of how we approach the process of laying this out.
Oh, I called it in. I'm sorry, I didn't see you raise your hand.
You're next.
He'll be up there all night.
He's got 3 minutes, so.
3 minutes.
Yeah, this is going a lot longer than 3 minutes, so I think we need to curtail.
Gary Molesky,
Just a
208 Meadow Drive. My biggest concern, there's been a lot of things addressed up here, and most of them I've thought through. My biggest concern, I'll go back to the safety of all, the kids on the street. My wife runs a daycare. She's already been out talking to these people. A lot of trucks coming around off Riverside Drive. They're going up a slight hill. They make the turn. They don't see because they're now coming downhill. I'm sure it's illegal. The kids are playing in the street. There's no other place for these kids to go. We all have small front yards. We don't have any backyards. So they're out riding their bikes. They're playing baseball in the streets. There's a lot of traffic in and out. I'm not looking forward to any sort of parade of homes. We went through this a few years ago with the fall, whatever it is, the home decoration thing. A lot of traffic. That was over quickly. Parade of homes runs for weeks. This construction's going to go on for 3 to 5 years, I suspect. I'd like the city or the village to be more concerned about this. I've called the clerk. She said call the chief of police. I plan on doing that. I'd like to have a stop sign put in front of my house. I don't know if that's allowed. Just to get people to stop as they drive down Meadow Drive, because they get going downhill, they get going fast, they then go fast around the corner to go up Bluebird. Big heavy trucks, construction trucks. I'd really like the village to be more concerned about this than certainly you're concerned, and you can talk to your contractors, whoever. I'd like more concern to come from the village on this. This water issue here is interesting. I'm wondering, once this is all built, what's the access that the village would have to this once this property's all developed? How do you get back there to clean things out? Where does this water go if it doesn't flow properly? If you've ever walked back there before this construction started, you can see clearly that this is an old riverbed, as you described. You can see it from high, the overhead pictures. You can walk back there and see the sandy water, the old riverbed, whatever that was. I know you've looked at it and you're engineers and stuff, but what does happen if this does fail? There's homes down at the end of Meadow Drive that aren't shown on here that have low backyards. There's basements back there. I just, these things happen. One heavy rain, everything rushes down that hill, everything comes down through that drain pipe, everything rushes off the existing land. Where does that water go if this doesn't work? What's the backup
Kevin,
plan?
do you have an answer for that? You just,
Right.
microphone.
So basically, your question about actually getting access to the facility, if should there ever be that need, there is drainage easements that are gonna be dedicated, on the plat. So,
Through the existing lots on there,
Yep.
or?
yeah, on that lot line.
Okay, so you can park a truck and unload a Bobcat and drive it back there and clean things out? Okay,
Yep, so there will be provisions to meet that.
This is a driveway, so
okay,
that would be the
all right.
access to that.
Yep.
Contingencies would be nice to know that these are in place, because suddenly water rushes down. I've worked with somebody who had this problem, and his little cul-de-sac backyard filled up with water. His basement was flooded because the drain pipes all clogged. I don't know what you're talking about with 2-inch pipes. Doesn't sound like a whole lot of drainage to me.
Yeah, there's not only just the little 2-inch pipe, but there's a number of different, like Raj had brought up, there's a bypass pipe that's gonna be in place. And that's an 18-inch pipe, and it's basically an open structure per se.
Okay.
I mean, there is gonna be a grate on that, but again, as, the homeowner association is gonna be responsible
Well,
for.
I shared this gentleman's concern with
Yep.
long-term, 30 years from now.
Yep.
But again, I'd like to stress that the village should take some consideration to the safety issues on this small, one way in, one way out street, lots of construction going on. I don't begrudge you for developing this. I appreciate that you're gonna probably put up some nice homes. I've seen your homes in the past. I appreciate that. That's not a trailer park going in, but I'd like this just to be done as planfully as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
You got it.
Now, you gonna counter everything he said?
No, he pretty much nailed it. All I want to say is that with the pond and the homeowners association, you guys are aiming at 55 years old and older, right?
Not correct.
Wasn't that one on the sign? Isn't that?
We started out as that, and then some people became interested that were younger, and I thought, why should we close the doors on a younger age group? So right now, the people that have lots reserved are all, I would say, 45 and older, but not 55.
Because I was just curious, because my in-laws live in a single-level house, and they're, the last people that are going to go out and clean out your pond are going to be the 70-year-old people. So I was just asking that question.
Right.
Other than that, you seem to be, you chased this land for 4 years, and you guys are going through bells and whistles and hoops and jumps, and I mean, this is incredible what you guys are trying to do to build it's my first time coming to a hearing like this, to build a development. It's unbelievable. You're gonna have 3 houses pump their poop uphill? I mean, it's crazy. And as
Not as uncommon as you think.
yeah, and as for you guys, and what they were saying about that whole development back there, the land, I mean, I had never walked it until you guys started building, and it's like a big wetland. So just make sure that whatever you're designing works, because what Gary is saying here, and all the water could run off and be a bad thing for a lot of people. If you guys have walked it, I walked back there and I'm just like, wow, I'd never been there. It seems really low and soft, and just want you guys to take that into consideration as well. So I know you'll build a good house, but I'm just wondering, it's a lot of work for what you're doing. You must be very passionate about it. So.
Get your name and address.
Oh, I'm sorry, Craig Lawrence, 303 Meadow Drive North, also on the cul-de-sac. And I have one of the kids on the bikes that flies around all the time, so, yeah. All right, thank you.
Kevin, did you say that on the stormwater discharge that the standard is 80% removal of solids, and you've calculated out 92.5%?
Yep, that's what they came up with.
So that's a good thing.
Above and beyond.
If I could make a quick comment on associations, I did Hazel Crest in Hudson in 1982, and that association is still functioning just fine with no trouble. There are 52 lots in that one. Starwood, just north of Hudson, that's 24 lots. That association is doing great, and they maintain a beach and trails and a bunch of other stuff. Indigo Ponds, just east of town, 53 lots, did that 15 years ago. That association is still functioning fine, so it can work.
I have a question then. I'm under the impression that a homeowners association pays a small dues or something, and after every 10 years, they hire someone to clean out the pond. They actually don't go out there with shovels themselves.
So what I anticipate happening is that they would elect somebody to be the quarterly or the yearly examiner
Yeah.
that goes out and checks every week or whatever period is appropriate to make sure that everything's functioning fine. Should it not be functioning fine, then he is empowered to hire somebody Gary or somebody to go out and fix what needs to be fixed, the association will have money to pay for that. And the dues will be minimal.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you. Yes.
I'm Jake Brickner, and I live at 315 Meadow Drive North. And I have a couple questions relating to, one, there's this lower depression area right here, and there's no standing water in it right now, and that is the intent in the future too. Like, this isn't going to be a runoff where there will be any water of any sort backing up onto our area. Okay. And then also this retaining wall right here, this is a really, again, sloped area right here. Is that just to lower the land but not actually higher any of it to cause any water to run this way onto my lot, or?
This is your lot here?
Yes.
Yeah, and this is just two questions that you have, or you got any more? Or just
Let's see here.
Because it might be easier if I just
I thought
address
it'd be
them
easier to
all.
answer one at a time.
I think those are my two. And then also just like this conservation easement in general. Does that mean like once somebody purchases a lot right here, they can't do anything with this going forward, or how does that whole conservation easement thing work?
It's primarily, the conservation easement is primarily set up so that land disturbing activities are not to occur, and that the land is in essence preserved. Now, that doesn't mean that if there's a active gully or erosion or other things that you can't go in there and fix that, but it's really meant to preserve the nature of the woods. And, you know, you could have all kinds of things. You could have a tornado come through and wipe out a bunch of the trees, and there's some things that just need to get cleaned up. But the general purpose and nature of the conservation easement is to conserve the slope and preserve it indefinitely. And
so what qualifies something to be able to fall into that? Like, why isn't this already in a conservation easement? Because this is pretty crazy steep right here.
You know, it's just the process that we've been going through, and the one gentleman hit it really on the head. There's so many rules and so many regulations and so many different layers that we ultimately have to go through the process of this stuff, and it's to me, I believe it's a serious problem in the 13 county Twin City metro area. Is that new housing has never been, the gap between new housing and existing housing has never been higher than it is today. And essentially what's happening is our costs are coming up, and we can't reach an obtainable price to have our families and children live in the same neighborhood. And so it's becoming very difficult to meet this. And so we're trying to do the right thing. We're trying to do all the things that we can, but in essence, somebody owns the property, and that they have certain rights to deal with the property in the fashion that they seem fit. The neighboring property, he has a slope. The property over here has your property has a slope.
Yeah.
And so, you know,
It's
theoretically, all this stuff can happen. I mean, and it just has to go through an engineering process to determine whether it's feasible and reasonable to, in essence, produce. And so with all the rules and all the layers that we have to go through, at the end of the day, you know, we've looked at the design, we've done this a lot, we understand kind of the hoops and jumps and things and what's reasonable and not reasonable, and we develop what we think is the best plan to, in essence, move forward. So in the interest of time, to address your questions on the low area here, this water all of this water is designed to go this way. There's a little bit of this area, and all of this area that comes down through here is designed to be bypassed, and this should not change from anything, because we're not adding to it, and so we're conveying it through, and that's basically the goal of that part of the layout that we did. And I think your other question was in relationship to the retaining wall.
How high is this, and then does it bring up the land that it would cause any water to run this way, or is it, you know, because this is my lot, I don't want additional water coming off this way that is going
Yeah.
this way now.
So and I have to look at things to see. So this is about 3.5 feet, and this is about 2.5 feet. So what I envision on that is essentially, if that was my backyard, that's basically where I plant my seat, and I can kind of look at everything else. It's not this high. It's not, it's meant like that. But it's a modular block wall is in general kind of designed to convey water through it. And so if there's a high moisture content in the soil from runoff and snow melt and those type of things, and the soil has a high moisture content, there's a kind of pebble rock behind the wall with drain tile, and all of that is essentially designed to alleviate the hydraulic pressure that falls between that. And so it's I envision this water to essentially just kind of soak in the ground or run perpendicular to the existing contours, that this kind of water goes this way, this kind of goes this way, this is all coming this way. I really see almost no real water being diverted because of that retaining wall.
Okay, I just want that confirmed, because I don't want, I
We're-
don't see this coming this way, but guess what? It could.
And just, there's a 1/2 foot drop. My eyes aren't the best. This is a top of wall of a 708, and this is a top of wall of a 707. So this is higher, this is lower. If at all would or could occur, it would go this way.
Okay. And then just to express, what they've all said before, it's like, this was intended to have some sort of development, which is fine, but this road doesn't go up to this house or have to cause all of this to happen. I think there's just too much happening there, and that's all I'd have to say on that as well.
Thank you. I have a retaining wall question. I have one in my yard, and it has a couple of PVC pipes in it. Or is it the different materials you don't require something like that? It just
No,
permeates
it's,
through the...
is it modular block or is it wood?
Yeah, it's got that rough face edges.
It's just a bunch of stones, basically.
No,
that are
it's block.
interlocking.
It's block, and
but
then you put
interlocking.
2 PVC pipes through it.
Yeah, and generally those are just kind of have you ever seen water come through them? Probably
No,
not.
never.
Yeah. And so
Never.
they're just in case, that's really what they
Okay.
are. Yep.
I have a question, Roger, on that. Now, just looking at the house more closely on Lot 4, it appears that should be a lookout, not a walkout. Is that correct? Because the ground is the garage floor is at 706.
Yeah, I can.
It's a lookout. I believe it is a lookout.
It's a lookout, yeah, so that's erroneous.
Well, yeah,
labeled
we
as a
show
W.
it, we show it as a walkout, and it has a little different, this being a custom-built house, this little parentheses of 2 is 2 additional steps, and if with that 2 additional steps, you could actually make it a walkout. So generally, there's already 2 steps, so you could actually do 4 steps. All that does is
Oh,
it
I see.
raises the basement level from the garage level, and sometimes that's, but if not, then obviously it would be a lookout, or
It
lookout.
seems to me like you're pushing down lower than you maybe should, but, if that's the case, that might mitigate some of the concern about the lowering of the grade in that neighborhood, but
Yeah,
I don't know. Who knows what that house would end up being anyway, right? Because it's not built yet.
Yeah, and generally, they follow the plan, and then they have to, if
Yeah,
they
it's not
deviate
even-
from it, they have to show how that works. That's really how that is.
Thank you.
But part of the deal is you're building all the homes.
Correct.
And so you'll have some input to help
Oh, right.
guide them into,
Definitely.
to make sure things are done right.
Yeah, we'll fine tune the home to the lot.
Public,
Yeah.
anything else? Yes, sir.
And I'll just say this quick, that's the only
Yes.
house that we have 2 steps in. Everyone else is standard in that fashion.
I didn't see the parenthetical too.
Hi, I'm Tom Redding, and I'm at 311 Meadow Drive North, and so that would be Lot 11 right here along the eastern edge of the plat. So just 2 main concerns. One would be in terms of prevention. So when we talk about maintenance, what you described, Mark, for an association, that would be great. If there's somehow to make sure that that happens with the association, not sure how much control you guys have over that, but to make sure that they're really responsible for preventing, or they have an incentive to prevent any problems, especially with this retention pond, rather than who's responsible for cleaning up the mess, right? So, and then I urge the commission, when the final plans are in, that that's thought of first and foremost. Obviously, a lot of concerns about the water runoff situation and preventing any mess. And then secondly would be a lot of very large trees along here, tall pines.
Beautiful.
And some very large oaks. So it looked from your plans, most of those are going to be kept. Is that correct?
We're
Or-
keeping as many of them as we can. So I love those large pines and oaks as you do. So
And then I guess for ones that end up having to be removed, if we could get a warning when they're going to be removed, and just to be that they're safely removed. Obviously, they're very large, and they threaten a lot of the properties along here as well. So obviously, that would be of concern too. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone? Anyone? Once we're out of public hearing, then we will be discussing it amongst us. We'd ask that we don't comment from the audience anymore.
I move that we go out of public hearing.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor of coming out of public hearing, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are out of public hearing at, any opposed? Any opposed? Well, I thought I heard everyone, but my hearing isn't that good. We are out at 9:08. Thank you. Thank you all for your comments. Before we,
Don't go too far away, Rick.
oh, no. Now we get to ask you questions again. I'm gonna read just part of this. And just, for the Plan Commission, we don't do a lot of subdivision things. This is not a conditional use permit. In a conditional use permit, which we see more of, we have more flexibility. We have more discretion. We don't have that in this. We don't get to tell people how to use their land. If it's a subdivision proposal, if they follow all the laws and all our village ordinances, they're pretty much entitled to their plat. And so what we do is we offer our suggestions. We make sure the public is aware and give them the opportunity to question everyone. And so, one more thing, I'll read this here too, this is well written. Since there will be public improvements like road, water, and sewer, some drainage issues, we will be requiring a development agreement with the applicant. The applicant knows this, and that's all part of the legal process. So that being said,
I would make one other comment about that too. All we're approving tonight is the map. We're not approving any houses, or how the houses get built, whether they have basements or don't have basements, whether they have walkouts or don't have walkouts. That's not our job. Our job is the lots, the maps, the plat. Each house will have to go through its own building permit process, following all of those rules, which is not our purview.
and unlike some things, we don't have to worry about variances or everything, because as Kevin told us, it meets all the setbacks, it meets all the minimum size things. So a lot of that makes our job a lot easier. So that being said, let's start on Mary's end of the table.
Questions, comments?
For questions and comments.
I'm fine, I think we hashed it out in the last few meetings.
I'd just like to say maybe we could, out of respect for those concerns of our children playing, maybe we could put some signage up or flashing slow children playing signs, or construction trucks approach at minimum speed kind of signs, something like that to help.
Can I address that?
Yes.
Public
So
safety.
that again is not a planning commission issue, but I would strongly suggest that whoever was told to call the police, please do that. I'll call the police chief tomorrow too and talk to him about that, and that's a police enforcement issue. I also would say that I would suspect that the developer is going to ask his contractors to slow down and not smart off to people. I hope he would do that.
I don't think ask is the right word, I think it's gonna be tell.
So, but from the village's standpoint, although there's probably, well, Anyone with a valid driver's license and any vehicle with a valid registration can drive on any public street in America. And we can't stop that, but we can stop people from driving unsafely. And I will talk to the police chief tomorrow morning about that. And I also hope that the developer will cooperate in making sure the drivers are not smartasses and slow down.
I'll comment on that, because I live on Michelson and 7th Street. 7th Street's a cul-de-sac, and there's a lot of people that whip through there and don't stop at the, and the chief was called, and then we saw the car out there for a few days, and that really helps. So. Rob?
Yeah, I guess that lot number one still bothers me a bit, but, because I looked at it a little more in detail, and just the buildable area that's on that, less the 20% slope, is only 9,200 square feet, which is marginal. And I understand, Roger, I mean, you've done your due diligence to get it to work, and I can see how it does. But I'm just concerned about any incident of construction on that slope that can erode more, cause it to erode more quickly, and, you know, become a bigger mess than anything we'd like to see. So that's my only word of caution, and I don't know that we can prevent it. I think the fact is that it's apparently, I mean, Kevin, maybe you can help me with that, is if it meets the qualifications of our buildable area in terms of the site. I mean, the lot is enormous in terms of the size of the site, but it's even more. It's all unbuildable site, except for 9,000 square feet of it.
Yeah, it's lot size wise, it definitely meets your minimum lot size requirement. You know, that was one of our concerns originally too, during the concept phase, but you know, with the retaining walls that they're looking at constructing to try to soften out the slopes and things, I think that's the only way that lot's gonna actually work, per se. In trying to minimize, the building itself, so it doesn't get too large. Yeah, that's.
To Rob's comment about something happening in the hill roads or something, are you pretty confident on that won't happen?
No, I mean, with what they've got proposed for the walls and things, after it's been constructed, it's gonna be less than 20% slope. And then with the conservancy easement that's gonna be in place afterwards, nothing's gonna be allowed to actually do any land disturbance in that area. And then they're gonna have their, appropriate erosion control measures in place during the construction of that building. So.
Yeah, I just know what it's like when you're building a hill, and you not only, I mean, the house just doesn't magically carve itself into the ground. You excavate, you may need to retain the, the temporary shoring device of some sort or another.
Yep.
I mean, it could be very difficult in the end game, but it's
Mark
cautious,
knows how to do
a
that.
word of caution in my,
Yep.
in my word. I mean,
Anything else?
no, otherwise, I think it's fine.
Gene?
I just have one comment. The house we've lived in, I think we've lived in about 30-some years, 6 maybe or 5. And I live on Summer Street on the corner, well, not on the corner because the pump house is on the corner of 10th and Summer. And when we moved there, we all had little kids, and there were probably 1, 2, maybe 5 houses going up Summer Street on either side, and it was a dead end.
Yeah.
Well, lo and behold, didn't they want to develop it? And we had kids in the street. And you know what we did? We put old broken toys so the trucks couldn't go fast, and they'd have to go around them. And then I went to the village and I got a sign that said slow children playing, and I got some other sign. But I had to come down here about 3 times, and then they went and put a sign up. I don't know that it slowed, our toys slowed more things down than, so there's a solution. It was different. I mean, it was all woods up there. The kids all played up there.
Gene, it's illegal to put toys in the.
The kids did it.
She sicked her dogs on him.
And then I sicked my dog on the truck, no. But anyway, I mean, you just work with the problem. And I think it's good to ask them to drive slower. I mean, I went out in the street and asked people to drive slower. Just put a couple big wheels out there and they gotta go around them. Slow them down,
Kip?
I'm fine.
Nothing? Anything else? Any other last comments from the principals? It says on our agenda and we would have a public hearing, and we would have a discussion and a possible recommendation. One possible recommendation would be to approve or not approve the preliminary plat. I would entertain a motion for an action.
I move approval.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, discussion. I think we pretty much discussed it, didn't we? Okay. Do we need a roll call vote?
It's not required.
Okay. Okay, well, I'll do both then. Okay, we have a motion on the floor
I'm
to,
sorry to interrupt, but did you want to include with Kevin's?
Yeah.
With Kevin's comments.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, definitely.
did you, okay.
I would
You
move
inserted
approval
that
with the conditions outlined in the
April
Engineers
28th letter,
28th letter from Cedar.
Cedar Corp. Thank you. And that's okay with the second? Okay. Any discussion on that? Hearing none. All in favor of approval of the preliminary plat application to create Artisan North subdivision, as we discussed for the last few hours, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Hearing none. This has been approved. Thank you. I'd like to take a 3-minute recess. Just to let you folks know, you're welcome to stay for our next topic. You're also welcome to leave if you don't want to stay. We're going to talk about the comprehensive plan. Excuse me? It's going to be real quick. I know, I just needed a drink of water. Okay. Item number 5, comprehensive plan update, discussion and possible recommendations. We have a letter from Patrick from Cedar Corp. He put together a cost proposal for comprehensive plan update. And so we've all had it, and we've all got to read it. But go ahead and say some things, Pat. First, my first question before you start is, has the village board seen any of this, or is this the first time it's being discussed?
This is the first time this is being
Okay,
discussed.
thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. So I think the first time I came and talked to you about updating the comprehensive plan was in February. We had a general discussion. I think we talked about what are things I could do, what are things you could do. And I think there was kind of a feeling of we don't want to go through the full process like we did last time. We look at this as a review. So what I tried to do is break it into tasks of things I think I would have to do to help you, and then things you could discuss as a plan commission and provide information to me to put together an updated draft. And so I divided it into 4 tasks. The 4th task is an alternative. We did talk I think at the end of our conversation in February about a survey. So I did contact UW River Falls, so I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. So one thing that would have to be updated is if you have a copy of your plan, you can see that throughout, and especially I believe it's in Chapter 2, the residents in North Hudson, there's a lot of demographic data that comes from the U.S. Census Bureau or another division that they have called the American Community Survey that provides updated information every year. It's kind of a rolling 5-year average. And so I think before you would begin your discussion, you would want all the tables updated so you can see if there are any trends going on within the community from last time we did the plan. With the updated tables, I would also update the associated narrative that's in each chapter, so you would have that as a starting point. With task 1, I also put in there that I would work with you on future land use planning. You have a land use chapter. I think that's something that would be beneficial if I help you with looking at land use concepts, updating the existing land use map, and kind of looking at the future growth of the village. And so that would be part of that process. Then task 2 is where I have you discuss things that I have laid out at the end of the memo. Things specifically you could look at, I think, and discuss within with the Plan Commission. Obviously, I would recommend that you read the whole chapter, but I think within some of the chapters, I picked out specific things I think are worth revisiting, and we'll look at those a little bit. So in task 2, I'm envisioning that the list I have, you would discuss amongst yourselves. You would provide me with any changes, any input, or if you would like some additional information for me to bring to you to help go through some of this, I can do that as well. And so each of those I kind of have an associated cost. With task 2, we're putting all the information together into a draft for a final review. Task 3 is kind of more the administrative thing. It's the public hearing. It's plan revisions after comment from the public hearing, printing of the copies, and then a distribution of the document. A document has to go to the county, any adjacent community, down to the state. There's a few other entities, I believe, that we have to provide copies to. So that's part of that process. And then 4 is the alternative. I did speak with, I think it's Denise, I have her name, Denise Parks, at UW River Falls, about a survey. She just looked quickly at the population of the area, and she had mentioned that they would probably look at doing a random sample survey, so they don't sample everyone, they don't contact everyone within the community, but they sample, and they would have to get approximately 310 responses to make it a valid survey. So they would sample. If they did not get a response, obviously they would track who it went to. They would follow up, I think, in a couple weeks with a postcard reminding, so there's a follow-up. At the end of that, if they don't get enough responses, they would look at probably a larger sample area within the community. And basically it was, the work isn't based on number of questions, because I think I talked about the size of the survey last time, and maybe we do something smaller. It was based on the number of pages that get mailed out. So as many questions as you possibly maybe put on 4 pages, 4 or 5 pages, and mail out and return, that would determine the cost. Again, she said if it's something you're interested in, she'd be more than happy to contact you and discuss it in more detail. But roughly looking at between $5,500 and $6,500, that would be to work with you to develop it, to do the mailing, to do the follow-up, and to do the tabulation afterwards. So.
Would that be a mailed? I mean, couldn't it be
Facebook or Twitter?
Yeah, I believe it's mailed.
It's mailed.
Yeah.
It's a hard
They,
thing.
yes, I don't think they do like a Survey Monkey, because, you know, electronic, because you hit some people and you miss others. And so this actually goes.
That happens with paper too.
Well, I mean, you get it
Email
though.
addresses of all the
Right.
homeowners of the village,
Right.
so we would have a hard time sending them an
volunteer.
email.
Not all the villages do Facebook or email.
Yeah, and you miss a certain segment of the
If
population.
you're actually
Yes.
trying to hit the population, you really have to do it by
Yeah.
mail.
Yeah. So if you're interested, that's something you could discuss with Denise. She'd be happy to talk to you more about that. And so after task 4, I went through each chapter or sections of the plan and thought, here are some things based on past conversations, past meetings I've heard you discuss, that you could discuss amongst yourselves at Plan Commission without my assistance. So first of all, there's a vision statement within your plan. I think I handed that
It's loose
out last
because it wasn't
time.
in the plan.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't get in the final draft. Also, the overall comprehensive plans, planning goals. You could review those on your own and give me any input you have on that. At the end of each chapter, there's a section called Goals, Objectives, and Implementation Options. Obviously, you can review those as well and see if they still make sense. If there are, you know, perhaps some of them were done and completed, and we can take them out and update the list. There might be others that were never in there. Again, that's something I feel you have the ability to redo. In chapter 5, so that anything that's not listed in here, I'm assuming that I would read through it, and there would be a minimal update.
In the interest of
Involved.
time, I would recommend that we just enter page 2 into the record.
Yeah, I won't go through each one. But those are the sections of each chapter I thought are very specific to your community, and you might want to discuss. Just one example, 1 minute, I'll be done. Under housing needs, what the community needs, and then there is a section on redevelopment options, mixed-use developments. That was a long discussion at a previous meeting. I think that would be something important that you discuss, so that you pick a direction, or throw it out if you don't think it's relevant.
Did you want to ask Melissa
Yeah,
now?
Melissa, we have a meeting in 2 weeks, is that right, or is that canceled, or?
I don't know, that's something I was gonna talk to.
A plan commission meeting?
Yes, the normal one.
Because this is not the normal time.
This is not the normal
Normal
one.
scheduled plan commission meeting is 2 weeks from tonight, and that's something I was gonna talk to you about to see if you wanted to have.
Would that be the only agenda item?
Would be this.
There's nothing else?
No, because this division,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
subdivision will not be ready for anything to come back.
Not ready?
Or, no,
Oh.
but here, the question is, before we even talk about this, and Patrick, I'm glad you gave us some costs, even at a minimum of $500, just to do a little addendum or anything, who has the budget for that? Is that in your budget as
Well, and
clerk?
that was gonna be my,
Yeah, too, yeah.
that was gonna be my point. I did sit down and talk with Gloria Traster. Unfortunately, this wasn't something that was put in the budget for this year because we, you know, I guess we probably should have had meetings last year. It would have had been decided in the fall in order to put it in the budget for this year. So right now, there's about $500.
Okay.
That was found, that can be spent. So that really limits on,
We can only do task 3.
right? So unfortunately, we did find $500 that we could use out of a fund to spend on this.
Right. And I think it came up at a different meeting about updating the comprehensive plan, so Melissa just asked me if I'd be willing to come and talk to you about it. So this obviously could wait until next year, or we've worked with other communities where they budgeted money the following year, and we started in the fall and didn't bill anything until the beginning of the year. So we're willing to work with you at any capacity during this process.
One thought I had, running by you guys, like on page 2 where you went through certain chapters and you said, here's the parts that sound interesting. And since we probably will have time before we actually tie into it, I was wondering if the members would like to look at some of the areas they have a particular interest in. For instance, Gene might want to look at the Parks and Recreation thing and see if, well, seriously, this is an example, and see if that's something that, it's pretty good like it is, or I'd really think that should be updated. And maybe instead of everybody going through this whole book, if everybody looked at an area you might be interested in, we'll see, that would help us set our budget for next year too.
Right, one other thing to think about, instead of doing an entire update, we can do an addendum.
Yeah.
We have not annexed any more properties since this was done. I think the Zappa 40 was already annexed
Correct.
into this.
Yep.
Derek was already in the mix here, and I think over the past 10 years, maybe 36 housing starts, and most of that was in Derek.
Yeah.
So I don't think, even though it's out of date, the demographics, all that kind of stuff is wrong, out of date, and the projections are really off. I think that we could even look at just doing an addendum of something that really needs to be done. Like if we changed any zoning laws or zoning ordinances since 2006 that aren't quite right, instead of doing a whole update since, I mean, these are the only copies of these things. There is an electronic copy, I heard, but that's nowhere yet.
I did find additional printed copies in the basement.
Except, well, they'll smell good.
Sitting with the taxes.
Well,
So anyway,
I'd
that's
say a
another
combination
alternative.
of the two. I agree with what you said, and I thought that if there's one thing in there that you really would like to get updated, we should know about it and see if
I mean,
that's something we can
this
look
thing
at.
doesn't even have all the pictures from the village. They're stock pictures that were in the template that was used to create this thing. So, yes, ideally, I'd love to pretty much throw this and redo it. Take new pictures, make it actually a North Hudson comprehensive plan. But personally, if this was coming out of my pocket, I'm not spending $6,000 to $10,000 to do it.
There's a lot of other things I'd spend money on.
Yeah.
In this village first.
Yes.
Is there any kind of grants that were going on? They said for.
They're not doing that anymore.
Look at some of these Wisconsin briefs, they were talking about grants that were being sent out to a lot of, was it $2 million? And then it stopped at like 2010. Did it pick back up again?
No.
It did not. There is I'm trying to think if it's under I'd have to look. Transportation Alternative Program. Might have planning grants.
I was wondering, can they help pay for it? Well,
Here, there's
it doesn't matter
there's
who
no
pays for it,
specific
we're paying
penalty
Yes.
if we
no, I
don't
know
do
that. I
it.
read that.
Yeah.
But here, grants, I love that. Well, isn't there grant money?
don't give 'em.
Where's the grant money come from? Who supplies that money? That's
They've
what I
already got
want
the
to know.
money, and the point was,
It's all the taxpayers, but the one thing about it is if there is
Somebody's gonna
grant
get it
money,
back.
somebody's gonna get it. So if the village of North Hudson doesn't get it,
It's-
some other village is gonna get
Yeah,
it.
I'm sorry, it's the community development block grant
Oh.
for planning.
Yeah.
But that's, you're typically for low to moderate income, and so
Yeah,
you
we
don't
we don't
qualify.
qualify.
I have a suggestion, and you can all shoot it down. It's not a legal suggestion. It's 9:30 at night. I think people are tired and
Yep.
a little tense and a little stressful. This discussion maybe could be tabled until the next planning commission meeting, to start talking about how we want to proceed and considering this and those sorts of things.
Can, yes, unless you were
Make a
looking
motion.
at someone to review.
And maybe to
Yeah.
assign people to review chapters, that sort of thing could all happen at the next planning commission.
What I would suggest, again, what I had said is if individual members have an individual chapter interested, go ahead and read it again, and next time we talk about this, bring it up. I would suggest we not have a meeting in 2 weeks.
I second that.
I second,
All in favor?
third.
He just sends me an email, so, but we'll see what else comes up.
Is there,
Yes.
is there
cancel
any
meeting.
issues that are
Table
brought-
till June or whatever.
And just so you know, this wasn't, the intent of this wasn't to be a proposal, it was to
We
be.
asked you to do it.
It was to be an approach.
It was.
No, that's.
We say thank
I
you.
like
Yeah,
it.
I didn't mean it that way, Patrick. I
Okay.
just,
I mean, I looked at it right away and I said, I'd like to do number 1 and number 3, at least get the numbers right, whatever numbers get.
I'd like to do the whole thing.
Yeah.
But not for this amount of money.
Well, you guys don't have the power of the purse, as it's called
No.
anyway. That's the village
But I'd
board.
like to be able to at least bring it up if I go to a village board meeting and say we're thinking about it.
Adjourn the meeting?
Well, unless you want to go. I mean, I usually,
Gotta make a
if there's something going on.
Do we have to make, I thought you could just adjourn the meeting since you're the chair, or is that
Oh,
only?
yeah.
I
make a
want
motion.
Gene to make the
I
motion.
move
'Cause-
we adjourn.
Is there a second for adjournment?
Second.
And all in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned at 9:37. Thank you all.